What are you sitting with that's a little too long for your comfort? What are you hanging on to that you'd be better off allowing to flow through? What are you hanging on to because you're afraid to lose something? And if you're afraid you're going to lose something, could that just be a belief system or a shift, a reframe that you could make in your mind of knowing what you're gaining in the freedom of relating to whatever it is that you feel like you're losing, in the lessons it delivered, the memories it gave you, and the blessings it brought in your life?
Welcome to the Point with Jeff Spikes, the show about achieving goals, embracing growth, and finding your true path. And now, here's your host, Jeff Spikes.
Hello and welcome to The Point. Today, it is a day to consider something new and different than what's been on our podcast for quite some time. Matter of fact, I'm not sure if you've had this topic even come across the bow yet with what we've been covering so far. And one of the ideas that came from this is the idea that we're getting awfully close to the middle of the year, right? It's if you're here, you're the type of person that is forward thinking and is always considering what's next to stay into the behaviors needed in order to move forward quickly and earnestly towards what you want, and also to be able to stay in the moment, right? The most valuable thing that you can do to stay in the moment is to create a visceral enough, a realistic enough, and realistic in the way that you can feel, taste, sense what the desired outcomes are for you in such a visceral way that you can then design the behaviors that need to happen on the daily basis and focus on those and stay in the moment and work towards being your best self and design the functions of how you move forward to be the most happy, the most fulfilled, and the most complete person possible that you can be. And have some form of guarantee, if there is any such thing in your mind, that you will achieve and attain what you're wanting to. Today, whether or not you're listening to this on, the road, if you're listening to this in, sitting in a chair, being comfortable, if you're just listening to this as background noise in your office, maybe you're in the grocery store and you've got it in one ear while you're walking around shopping. Brace yourself and know that you are happy and that you are fulfilled and that you are living in the top percent of the world, in that you are able to do these things and that you're living in a level of success that many people in the world don't have the opportunity to think of. And, that goes for many different realms of thought and of behavior of where we are. But if you're in this country, you're living in a place of plenty. And there are other topics and other shows where you can listen to some stats and other things on that. But just know that you're in a good place and count your blessings and sink into your gratitude. And that helps you protect yourself mentally as we open up the door to talk about grief and perspective around grief in thinking about moving forward. The middle of the year can be a time to consider where we are so far. It's time to take breaks. It's summer break for schools. It's summer vacations. It's, theme parks are very busy right now. And you are taking the trips you've planned throughout the year with your family when everyone's available and there aren't the same restrictions. So, it's also a time to reflect and feel comfortable. So you're either walking into your vacations in stress of wanting to make sure you have everything done that needs to be done before you leave, or you're walking into your vacations relieved and ready, knowing that everything that you've done is planned for this and that everything's going to work perfectly, and you will even advance and grow while you're taking a vacation and spending time with your family. Either way, you're going on vacation and you're going to do these things, and it is a mid-year checkpoint to consider How well am I doing? Where are my stress levels? Where are your stress levels? Another event that happened that brought grief up to the forefront is I was asked to be a guest in a podcast called Grief. Let's talk about it. Tony Lynch, I met with Tony Lynch a few weeks ago, is the host of that podcast and has a lot of episodes and tries to does them, from what I understand, very, very regularly. And we really connected on the idea of grief. And one thing to be sure of is that if you have some level of grief, it's important you can feel honored and respected and be given the space to have the grief in your current perspective of how that works for you. At no time in this podcast is it designed to disregard or not consider what you might be going through or what you are feeling. Your feelings and your thoughts and whatever your process is with grief is absolutely validated. And there's empathy and consideration and understanding as to what you have gone through or what's happened or whatever loss you've had. This is really more of an idea of that's opened the door to talk about how you can be stuck and what things come up in life that can get you stuck and specific ways of how to get unstuck. So today you're going to get to listen to some ideas and thoughts and concerns about grief and how grief can come in and how grief can impact you, perspectives that you can choose while having grief, and you know that the feelings you're going through are delivery mechanisms to teach you something. I've learned that sometimes the hard way as I've revisited feelings over and over and over from similar situations and thought to myself, why is this happening again? Why do I have to experience this again? So if you're feeling that sense of emotion or that, then what it is that the lesson's not being gleaned. You're not learning the lesson that's meant to be learned from that emotion, or there's something deeper or greater that you're meant to experience from it and learn from it, that should you learn it, you can move forward and take everything with you. Now, there's other forms of grief as well that are just basic loss from people that we love. And it's interesting to consider sometimes why some people, based on their belief systems, have different experiences with similar loss. Of course, if we, in knowing in the point, we talk about strengths and we talk about uniqueness and how we're all the same and that we have these unique things about us, and that is one connecting point. You can be 1 in a million and still be the same because you're 1 in a million just like everyone else. You're 1 in 34 million based on Clifton strengths, and so is everyone else. Saying that we're super unique doesn't separate us if we're looking for how that uniqueness is meant to improve and consider and be a part of everyone else's life that you can touch. But depending on what you choose to believe or what you were taught to believe, you might have a different experience with grief than another person sitting next to you that has a different belief. Regardless of how all of that works, it does lead into the idea of how you can get stuck if you sit in it for too long and don't learn to process through it. And when we get stuck, I want to make the consideration for you today that it's like when a river turns into a lake. You put a dam into the river, and that causes the river to stop flowing, and it becomes a lake. Now, if you just put the dam up and you leave an opening so that the river continues to flow, but it slows it enough to form the lake, and then you can open the dam enough, open the louvers enough to allow it to flow so the rest of the river doesn't appear to be interrupted from its natural state. Or you can restrict it further, but there's a level of control that goes along with putting a dam in place. If you just build a dam, beavers do this and it just overflows and it causes a pond and it flows over naturally wherever it finds the lowest point for water to flow. So you've seen these different experiences. If we think about how we can get stuck, oftentimes grief can put in us, if we sit in it too long, some form, it can turn into a depression, and it can really get us stuck in a place where it's difficult for you to move past it. I've been stuck in different forms of grief. But grief isn't always about losing someone else. Grief can also be walking through change and working on improving and becoming the best version of yourself. Sometimes you can actually find yourself grieving something that you're losing in yourself that you valued in some way. Even I've experienced that even if I choose to let go of a part of myself that I just know isn't working, a strategy that I was using, a way of living, a way of thinking that was working for me at one point, I might grieve the loss of that. Even though it wasn't serving me anymore, might grieve the loss of the way that that worked. And there's ways that we've worked through the framework and that I've been taught and that I teach others to work through shifting the framework and readjusting the lens of what we're choosing to look at. There are some times, depending on what walk of life you're in, if you're part of a religion or anything else, there are some religions that have timing to these things if it's a personal loss. We lose a loved one. Some religions have traditions and rituals and things to walk through where you wait a certain amount of days and you experience the feelings you're meant to experience for those days, and you wear certain clothing and you go through there's all those traditions that help bring some semblance of physicality. Well, that's no different than going through the process that you would go through to visualize when you're looking at building a dream and creating a sense of reality towards something that you want to achieve. Wanted to bring it into the current moment and work on that style of manifestation or that style of realizing something in your life that you want. That mechanism of experiencing those emotions is really not that different than going through a tradition or a ritual to allow yourself to grieve the loss of something. Now, you can set up a structure for yourself as well if you're going through something for yourself where you feel like you're losing a part of yourself. If you're letting go of a strategy, any former smokers or drinkers or anything else where you've changed your behavior on that, there you might go through a grieving process of not having that release any further and going through a process of grieving that release or that relief that you used to feel that you no longer get to feel, but knowing that that wasn't working for you anymore for whatever reason. Someone very dear to me was in the hospital recently, and the doctor says, you should stay away from all the alcohol. And no amount of time was given. It was just stay away from alcohol. They're going through a grieving process of not enjoying their glass of wine, but at dinner or before bedtime. That can also, and for that person, could become a stuck point where they sit there feeling terrible about not being able to have something and wondering if it's all worth it. Not liking the life change. And that became a place where they sat a little too long for their comfort. What are you sitting with that's a little too long for your comfort? What are you hanging on to that you'd be better off allowing to flow through? What are you hanging on to because you're afraid to lose something? And if you're afraid you're going to lose something, could that just be a belief system or a shift, a reframe that you could make in your mind of knowing what you're gaining in the freedom of relating to whatever it is that you feel like you're losing, in the lessons it delivered, the memories it gave you, and the blessings it brought in your life? Again, to be sensitive to anyone going through any type of grief. Amanda Valentine is another friend of mine that went through the Balm coach training, that was a grief specialist, and she used to read Henry Cloud books, and is an expert in helping people process grief. The stages of grief are not that different from the stages of change. And going through grief is going through change. But if we allow ourselves to get stuck for too long, if we allow ourselves to sit in something too long, non-moving water grows mosquitoes and gets all kinds of changes colors and does all kinds of things. If it becomes stagnant water and becomes unsafe to drink, and it's difficult to manage and deal with, it causes all sorts of problems. So the same thing, if you don't let the water flow through the dam at some level and you end up with stagnancy, if it ends up stagnant, it ends up not being good, not helpful, not useful, not beneficial. And it causes additional problems. Not allowing something to flow naturally and not trying to find some form of balance can be damaging. So grief is very similar to that. And it can cause us to sit in a place of losing our sense of purpose for ourselves. So you can lose your sense of purpose and you can lose your sense of passion for what you're meant to do while you're here. And it can build on itself to create other issues. And then life can become a little consuming and overwhelming. You can start to feel a sense of burdened, of feeling burdened and encumbered by all kinds of issues that are coming up. That sense of overwhelm then also breeds procrastination and causes us to delay and hold back and not get as much done. It's just too much to get everything done. There's too many things to do. Why do anything at all? That builds on top of itself, and before you know it, your negative self-talk kicks in. You're feeling less than. You think everyone's better than you, and you can hear and see the spiral that happens. And either you've been through it or you've lifted up a friend that's been through it. It's a real thing that we go through. So how do we keep that from happening? But check out grief. Let's talk about it. If you're struggling with grief, I'll be on that show here in June at some point, and let's talk about it. That's one thing. And let's remember that if you are struggling with grief, keep it flowing. Keep talking about it. Keep sharing it with friends. Find someone to talk to professionally if that benefits you, if you prefer that. If you have a coach, work it out with your coach. Talk to your coach about how to keep moving forward. The world doesn't have to stop around you when you are going through grief. And you may choose to pause parts of life, if not all of life, for a period of time to experience what you're meant to experience in that. But not all feelings that feel bad, such as grief, are bad for us. Some of them are very healthy and normal to go through. It's the fear that we won't shake it or lose it and that it won't flow through us sometimes that keeps us from allowing it to flow. Collaborate on ways that you can continue to move forward. And the next 3 weeks, you're going to have an opportunity to really work with me and dig in to consider what it's like to be stuck, but more importantly, what are the things you can do to get away from being stuck and get away from these enemies. The purpose you can create, you can work on proactively. And if you're one of the people that still struggles with the idea of understanding and gaining clarity on what you want in life, this is a great call to action time to consider what do you want and putting more clarity and more sense of feeling and emotion and color and vibe and taste and scent and smell to it. What's it look like? And really think about what you want. And not just in the material sense, in the relational sense. What types of problems would you like to have? What types of phone calls would you like to get that are the last minute things you're going to need to deal with before whatever it is that you are doing that you want to do? Right? And everyone has last minute things pop up. It's how we deal with them. It's how you deal with them that you get to experience whatever kind of life you're living. But really getting down to those types of levels of understanding of what you want can be very beneficial. Just like taking time out to feel what you need to feel, to experience and gain the true benefit from whatever it is that you're grieving or going through that you're feeling a sense of loss from. Not staying stuck in it long enough that it puts you into a place of a lot of man, I'm losing the word there, not unresponsive, unresourceful emotions, thoughts, feelings, because by the time you get to that place where you're speaking poorly to yourself and you're talking down to yourself and you're less than everyone else and you start looking at things online and thinking, boy, I wish I had that life and why can't I have these and poop, 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 poop. Those are the things that you get to stay away from. Those are the things that I get to work on when I sense them and feel them. And I don't know if anyone is immune to them, but everyone can become better at managing them to where it doesn't become a problem. Those thoughts don't stay a problem. And they become less common. Doesn't mean they can't pop up at any given time, but that's up to you. It's up to you and the life you're choosing and the way you're living and the friends you have allows or cuts you off or allows you to have some of those feelings that really can be beautiful, even though they don't feel super resourceful at the time. But leaning into it and gaining what is needed and taking that pause can be as valuable as building the vision of what you want. It's having the sense of emotion and feeling and being connected to what matters most so you can pull the lesson from it. It's similar to a memory you're implanting in the future when you're trying to create something in the future. And when you're creating this huge vision for yourself so you can pull it back in to those daily behaviors, you're doing the same thing. You're gaining the lessons from something you're creating. You're gaining the lessons before you're having the experience so you can really feel and sense through it. You're asking others that have gone through it what it's like for them. The idea is we're in mid-year. You deserve a break to go with your family. You deserve to spend the money, the time, the resources, use the resources that you've put set aside to have the best time you can imagine with in whatever way you're having for this vacation season. And if you're encumbered with a lot of other thoughts or there's other things that have happened, there's ways to flow through those. The important thing that you're going to get to talk about for the next few weeks is if you get in a place in your life where you feel stuck, there is a way out, and we're going to talk about that. There's 3 key things that you can do to combat the 3 major things that contribute to you getting stuck. We're going to cover those things over the next few weeks. So join me on the journey of talking about grief here at Grief Let's Talk About It podcast with Tony Lynch. Consider what we can benefit from, and hopefully we can be of amazing service to people who are going through rough times in sharing with him on his podcast. You send me notes and other things, I'll be sure to share them with him. Looking forward to spending more time with you as we go down this road over the next few weeks. You don't usually get to hear me do a series or a sequence, but that's what you're going to get to experience now. Much gratitude for you. Much gratitude for the amount of subscribers, and more than anything, like you always get to hear, your comments, your questions, your statements or requests of what you'd like to hear discussed or what guests you'd like me to have as we've opened up to guests now. I'm always super grateful and welcoming all of them. And I promise you I will respond to anything that you comment on or any questions that you have. And so far, I think I've caught everything. So blessings and peace, and we will see you again next time.
Jeff Spikes, the show about achieving goals.
Thank you for joining us for another amazing episode of The Point with me, Jeff Spikes. Please visit jeffspikes.com for everything you would need to know to engage with me offline. And lastly, thank you for your time, your attention, and your consideration. This is The Point.
The show about achieving